President Marcia, Charlotte, it's an honor to follow you. That was inspiring. Our speaker today is State Senator Scott Wagner. And Senator Wagner was first elected to the State Senate in March of 2014, winning in a special election to represent the citizens of the 28th Senatorial District, which includes the better part of York County. And Scott won as a write-in candidate. And that is something that most people at the time would have said was actually impossible to do it, and yet he did. In November 2014, voters elected him to a full 4-year term in the State Senate. Wagner serves as chairman of the Senate Urban Affairs and Housing Committee, is vice chairman of the Labor and Industry Committee, and also serves as on the Intergovernmental Operations, Transportation, and Major Policy Committees. Further, Wagner is on the has a coveted seat on the Appropriations Committee. Wagner's profile includes bringing financial reforms to state government, controlling property taxes, and helping to spur economic growth. As a steadfast advocate for government fiscal reform, Wagner declines the state pension and health care plan. Further, he does not collect per diems, and he uses his Senate paycheck to pay for all of his travel, legal fees, and expenses associated with his job, which exceeds his annual state senator salary. In addition to being state senator, Wagner owns several businesses, collectively employing over 550 people, the largest being Penn Waste Incorporated. Penn Waste has $65 million in revenue and is a local waste hauler and recycling company located in Manchester, York County, and serves South Central Pennsylvania. Wagner is active in the York not-for-profit community as a generous benefactor and has served in organizations promoting entrepreneurship and leadership development. He is the past recipient of the South Central PA Entrepreneur of the Year Award, and Penn Waste was the 2015 winner of the Governor's Impact Award for Community Commitment. Wagner enjoys spending time with his wife Tracy and their children. In his free time, he likes to read, ski, and travel. Senator Wagner will share his story of success as a business owner, the adversity he's faced along the way, and why it's imperative that taxpayers start asking what their tax dollars are being spent on. Fellow Rotarians and guests, please warmly welcome our State Senator, Scott Wagner.
Mike, thank you for the introduction, and it's great to see so many familiar faces, and thank you for being here today. For those of you that don't know me, and pick up the paper you showed, or you will, I'm Scott Wagner. I grew up on a farm not far from here in York Township, and I've lived in York County my entire life. I graduated from Dallastown High School, and I attended Williamsport Area Community College for a year before I decided that it wasn't for me. I would like to note that I briefly attended night classes at York College for Business, and I learned something within the first hour of the class from the professor, and he stated, if there's anything you remember from this class, remember there's no such thing as a free lunch. That was great advice. I joke with people that I've been in the waste business my entire life because as a kid, probably somewhere in the 9 to 10 year range, I would shovel horse manure on my parents' farm, and I received $5 a week, so that was my incentive, and I think John Schmidt probably saw me doing that. But I knew at an early age that I wanted to be my own boss, and I know that some of you will find it shocking that I have a tough time taking orders from others. That's my joke for the day. So I started my first small business when I was 20 years old, and I never looked back. In 1985, I started a waste company called York Waste Disposal, and I sold it to Republic in 1997. A funny thing happened. Within 1 week of the ink drying on the sale documents, it became apparent that Republic Industries had no interest in my skills or my knowledge. They promoted me to the position of area chairman, and that means go find an office somewhere else, we'll keep paying you and leave us alone. The smartest part of the whole deal was that the non-compete that I had negotiated was for 3 years and not the typical 5-year non-compete. On March 1st of 2000, I started Penn Waste with 2 trucks, along with Carol Turner, my former sales manager from York Waste Disposal. Since March of 2000, Penn Waste has grown significantly. The company now employs a little over 360 people. Our service area covers 6 counties, We service almost 200,000 residential customers and more than 3,500 commercial customers. In February of 2015, Penn Waste opened a 96,000 square foot state-of-the-art recycling facility in Manchester Township. This facility is one of the top 5 facilities in the nation. And incidentally, this is my 5th facility since 1997. You know, early on in my business career, I learned a very important lesson. And let's call this lesson number 1. Lesson number 1, to be successful and survive in the private sector business world, it is critical that you build and surround yourself with a world-class team. Lesson number 2 requires that an effective leader have the ability to provide a vision for the company, develop a business plan, and understand how to execute the business plan. The other part of success comes from asking questions. Let's call that lesson number 3. If there's something you don't understand, keep asking questions until you understand. Lack of knowledge is not an excuse when it comes to making mistakes when you had an opportunity to ask questions. And I'm looking to my left and I see Attorney Neil Slanker, who keeps me out of trouble when I don't sometimes ask all the questions. Penn Waste is a multi-million-dollar company. My business enterprises are where they are today because at Penn Waste and my other companies, we watch every penny that comes in and every penny that goes out. So let's talk politics. I've been involved in politics since the early 80s when my attorney Chris Ness ran for the office of district attorney. Chris's campaign for DA was most likely my first campaign contribution. I think it was $150 or $200. Shortly after I started my first waste company, York Waste Disposal joined the National Solid Waste Management Association that had a Pennsylvania chapter. Through our state waste association, I became involved in Pennsylvania state politics because I learned very quickly that the waste industry was becoming more and more regulated. As I became more involved in local and state politics, I found that people were knocking on my door for contributions, and over time it became more and more people asking for money. As I continued to get deeper into the political scene, I noticed that many issues were not solved year after year, and regulations on my waste company kept increasing it, making it more difficult to operate. A funny thing was happening. The same people kept stopping by for political contributions. I started to turn up the heat by asking what they had accomplished over the last several years since they had stopped by last, asking for contributions. Something weird happens. When you start asking questions, people start getting defensive. People don't want to give you the answers because they don't want to be the ones held accountable for those answers. For years, I've stayed behind the scenes helping candidates financially. Unfortunately, many politicians have gotten used to the lifestyle in Harrisburg and started caring more about keeping their jobs rather than making tough votes on necessary financial reforms and other issues. I was fed up. I made a decision in August of 2013 that I was not going to sit on the sidelines any longer. I've seen how bad public policy can hurt small businesses and our economy. So I chose to run for public office. I ran a write-in campaign, as Mike mentioned, for the Pennsylvania State Senate seat left vacant by my predecessor, and I won. Outside sources were trying to keep me out of the race. I wasn't the Republican establishment's handpicked candidate. A nasty attack campaign was waged against me in an attempt to smear my reputation. Despite the negativity from my opponent's campaign on March 18, 2014, 11,000 people came out and voted my name on a Tuesday. The voters of the 28th Senate District of York County made history that day because they sent me to Harrisburg as the first ever write-in candidate to join the Pennsylvania legislature. And that's the House and Senate, folks. I was sworn into the Pennsylvania State Senate on April 2nd to fill the remaining term for my predecessor. I went on to win the primary election in 2014, the general election in November 2014, and I started serving a full 4-year term in the Pennsylvania State Senate last January 2015. I'm honored to represent York County's 28th Senate District. And I can tell you that the learning curve has been fast and it's been very, very steep. When I first went into the Senate, I knew things would be bad. Within months, I assessed that the things that I thought were bad were actually 10 times worse than I imagined. This coming Saturday, April 2nd, I will have served in the Pennsylvania State Senate for 2 years. Folks, we have massive financial issues in Pennsylvania that must be resolved quickly. So let's talk about the issues. Massive issue number one is the pension system. We have a $60 billion liability, and it's growing every single day. We have a set return in Harrisburg of 7% as an annual performance goal that is completely unrealistic. Many state employees are spiking overtime to get larger pension payouts based on a 3-year average of their compensation before retirement. Mind-boggling to me is that over 1,000 people receive $100,000 or more in annual pension payments. The top 2 pension receivers are former public university administrators that receive $477,000 and $455,000 per year for the rest of their life. Massive issue number 2. Many agencies are out of control. There is very little experience, professional, and knowledgeable management in place. Complete turnover every 8 years or less with agency secretaries and many senior managers is a clear right recipe for disaster. The best example is the Department of Corrections. The Department of Corrections is a 16,000 employee operation. Last year during Senate Appropriations hearings, Department of Corrections Secretary Wetzel stated that if corrections officers would work some additional overtime, there would not be a need for additional hires. But despite what Secretary Wetzel said, fast forward appropriations hearings just recently, 400 new employees were hired, and overtime has skyrocketed. This year, the Department of Corrections is looking for a $200 million increase in funding for the 2016-17 budget year. Within that $200 million request, $73 million is going to be used for pension obligations. Overtime at the corrections facilities is out of control. A review of last year's overtime records reveal the following. 7 employees made more than $100,000 just in overtime alone. Forget their base salary or wages. 130 employees made more than $50,000 in overtime alone. Nearly 1,000 employees made more than $25,000 in overtime alone. More than 3,700 employees made more than $10,000 in overtime. It is important also to note that inmate population has decreased over the last 4 years. Let's go on to massive issue number 3. Benefit percentages are out of control. Many of you in this room are private sector business owners. Private sector business owners focus on benefit costs. Based on a percentage of benefits to $1 a payroll, the private sector typically runs 50% or less for benefits. Many state agencies are at 75 to 100%, and some are over 100% in benefits for $1 a payroll. The Department of Corrections is at 80%. The Liquor Control Agency is 89.9%. The previous year was 81%. In 2015, the Liquor Control Agency had 3,104 salary positions. Payroll was $139.9 million. Benefits were $125.8, or 89.9, as I mentioned earlier, of payroll. So if I were to factor in a private sector percentage of 50%, it would be $70 million. It would be a reduction of $56 million in just 1 year on benefits. And that's just one agency. Multiplied by 30 agencies, you're talking some very serious money. Folks, let me tell you, I'm the messenger. This is simply unsustainable. Rising, out-of-control benefit costs are going to bury Pennsylvania along with the pension crisis. Let's talk about massive issue number 4, public school districts. There are over 500 school districts across Pennsylvania, and all of these districts have volunteer school boards. Contract negotiations by 500 school boards is another issue we need to address in order to control costs. These school boards are negotiating wage, benefit, and step increases with union representatives without Harrisburg having any input in the process. Harrisburg is simply expected to cover the costs from these negotiations and these contracts, no questions asked. Another huge issue is that school boards have members of the board that are either former teachers, married to a teacher, or or have children that are teachers. There are huge conflicts on school boards. And trust me when I tell you this, teachers are favored by board members over taxpayers. Massive issue number 5. Unused sick, holiday, vacation, and personal time off not being used, and we are not accruing for this liability, and it's another large hidden problem. Last year, 2 different Senate staffers received payouts for their unused time. One person received $112,657, and the other received a little over $100,000. And this is on top of the generous pension that they will receive for the rest of their life. And one of those people received a severance package. There are easily several thousand employees that have unused vacations, sick, and personal days. What's the total cost? And John Schmidt would know this. This is an off-balance sheet liability. This is accounting fraud. I serve on the Appropriations Committee. And it is, and you mentioned coveted. The reason it is coveted, and I appreciate the opportunity, but there are a lot of senators who don't want to sit on appropriations, and some House members, because there's an awful lot of work. And I mean a lot of work. So, moving forward, I see my job as a state senator as being similar to a board member of a Fortune 50 company. While the general fund budget is approximately $30 billion, if you add in all the other funding sources, fees, licenses, federal funding, Pennsylvania's overall budget is almost $90 billion. And again, that $90 billion is larger than some Fortune 50 companies. So, I want to show you that this is a copy of the 2016-17 budget that was crafted by Governor Wolf. And, I mean, this is like the old Sears catalog that we had as a kid. And trust me when I tell you, this budget book is very, very complex. It is not physically possible for me or other legislators, Keith, Seth are here, to understand every single detail. There are so many items that are buried in this budget, and they are buried very cleverly. In my opinion, this is one of the major reasons that Pennsylvania is out of control. I am in favor of zero-based budgeting. You may find it interesting that Exxon, a public company with $300 billion in revenue, does zero-based budgeting. And there's a young lady who used to work for Exxon that told me that fact. Thank you. And it was verified. The current mentality in Harrisburg is very simple. Our agency received $200 million last year. We should receive at least 5% or more for this year's budget. And next year they'll be back 5%. There's a 5% mentality. Remember, I'm from the private sector. In 2015, the Pittsburgh and Philadelphia CPI index was a negative 0.02%. From February 22nd up until March of this year, the 2016-17 budget hearings took place. And let me quickly run through some of the things that I've learned. In 2014, there were 6,400 state employees who earned more than $100,000 or more last year. Or excuse me, in 14. In 2015, that number grew to 7,700. 1,300, it's almost a 20% increase. The most shocking discovery, the state employee with the highest earnings in 2015 was a Westchester University swim coach who had earnings of $420,000 last year. Okay? The state police, Pennsylvania State Police, have between 135 and 145 full-time personnel permanently assigned to casinos throughout the Commonwealth. The total cost for these personnel in the casinos is $28.5 million, and it's almost $200,000 per person. This is one that's mind-boggling to me. Another disappointing discovery is to learn that the state police are being funded out of the fuel tax revenues. Every gallon of gasoline or diesel fuel that is pumped in Pennsylvania, 11.7 cents goes towards funding the Pennsylvania State Police. Currently, the state police receive $833 million in funding from fuel taxes, when in fact, I believe the state police should be funded from the general fund. This is a major detail that the legislature did not clean up when the transportation bill was passed in November of 2013. And here is another really good example of waste and a lack of accountability. The state began the upgrade of a statewide radio system approximately 10 to 12 years ago, and the Pennsylvania State Police also use this system. Well, here's the bad news. The total cost spent so far is approaching $1 billion, and guess what? The system doesn't work. I've sat through hearings, and they put up 700 repeater towers to make this system work, and it just makes you want to explode. This is the second year that the statewide radio system disaster has been discussed. Now, here's a little bit of a side note. At Penn Waste, we have a roll-off truck that goes to a glass processing facility north of Pittsburgh, and our truck has a $600 Motorola radio in it. And he can easily communicate with our dispatcher in Manchester, Pennsylvania. I mean, come on, folks. Wow. I'm telling you, you cannot make this stuff up. Seth would know this, Keith would know this. But the more questions I ask, the deeper the rabbit hole gets. People consistently ask me if I'm frustrated. My answer is always the same. I'm not getting frustrated, I'm getting more motivated, and trust me, folks, I'm just getting ramped up. Okay? I've spent my entire adult life facing the same challenges that all of you, or most of you in this room have faced. Whether it's making a payroll, balancing a budget, negotiating details, resolving workers' comp claims, securing financing, collecting money, selling new customers, riding out multiple recessions. I've been through 5 of them. Building relationships, finding good employees, strategically growing my business. You know, owning a business is one of the largest risks that you can take in life. Every experience in my professional life has prepared me for the challenges that I now face in the state Senate. Every day, my company, Penn Waste, goes up against 2 of the largest public waste companies in the United States, and we're winning the battle. I understand that compromise is necessary for government to work effectively. I've made friends in the Senate and the House, both Republicans and Democrats. And I've upset some people. So what? And trust me, folks, I don't have a problem sleeping at night, okay? Because I'm up there to do the right thing. I've spent the last 2 years getting to know people, building relationships, and learning their stories. And a lot of people have interesting stories, and it relates directly to how they vote and what some of their issues are. But at the end of the day, I'm going to call it like I see it, and I'm not going to apologize if I hurt somebody's feelings in the process, because I have a job to do. One of the worst excuses I hear from colleagues on why they won't vote for necessary reform is, I need to vote my district. House and Senate members may represent a specific district, but they should feel some responsibility to do what is right for all Pennsylvanians. I've seen the waste, fraud, and abuse, and I just told you about a lot of them. I cannot, in good conscience, vote for any budget that includes tax increases and doesn't address efficiencies, accountability, and controls on spending. We absolutely need to fund our schools and provide a good quality education for our students. House Bill, the recent budget bill, House Bill 1801, was recently voted on and sent to the governor to provide supplemental appropriation funding for our schools by reinstating over $6 billion for education, medical system, and corrections that were blue lined by Governor Wolf last December. 1801 restores the full amount of basic education and adds $200 million more without raising taxes. Governor Wolf continued to say he was going to veto House Bill 1801, and last week, instead of vetoing the bill, he allowed it to become law. Governor Wolf said he did not sign House Bill 1801 and allowed it to become law as his personal protest over the budget. Unfortunately, Governor Wolf wants more tax dollars and will not address any spending or expense issues, and most importantly, hold people accountable. I receive letters every day from taxpayers, actually all over the state, a lot in my Senate district, but all over the state, who are on fixed incomes and are leaving their homes because they can't afford their school property taxes any longer. You know, when I was growing up, everyone's dream was to own their own home. No taxpayer owns their home, folks. The government owns that home. How is it fair that you spend your whole life working to pay off your home only to have to move because you can't afford your property taxes? You know, how am I supposed to let that happen by voting for another tax increase when I know the money needed for education won't actually be used on the students? It's going to go to pensions and benefits. Recently, probably more recently, I've been called an obstructionist for standing by my principles. If you recall at the beginning of my presentation, I talked about asking questions and holding people accountable. At the end of the day, I'm not an unreasonable person. I just want answers. Teachers and administrators deserve a fair wage. I understand their challenges. Teachers are there to educate our children, not to raise them. Parents need to take a more active role in their children's lives. But Pennsylvania is on a fast track towards bankruptcy because we can't afford to continue with the outdated pension system, and it's getting worse by the day. Everything I see wrong in Harrisburg didn't just happen yesterday. It's a result of 35 to 45 years of bad decisions and greedy politicians taking care of themselves and their friends. Both political parties, Republican and Democrat, are to blame. It's time to clean up the mess and get Pennsylvania back on track. I'm willing to compromise when it's in the best interest of everyone, but right now, raising taxes is not in the best interest. I may not be the most polished guy in the room, and there's some politicians out there that I watch, and they are smooth dudes. And I would love to be just like them. But I refuse to stop asking questions because I make people uncomfortable. Recently, I had a conversation with the CEO of a business support organization, and he commented to me about how too many in the legislature have found their current positions to be the best job they've ever had. Plenty of good pay and outstanding benefits. And he went on to say there are too many elected officials that seek to avoid any kind of conflict or controversy that would jeopardize their employment. And he made a point that view does not apply to me. He said to me, you don't need this job, and you're doing it because you've seen firsthand what needs to be changed in Pennsylvania. And he went on to say, your attitude has struck me as, I don't need to be here, I'm here because there are things that need to be done. Well, and he also went on to say, he said, you can tell people when you're up for re-election, I'd like your vote, but if I don't get it, it's not the end of the world because I can go back to my companies. So folks, in closing, and I'm going to be as diplomatic as I can, I don't need the job in the Senate, and I don't need the money. It is humbling and an honor to represent the people of the 28th Senate District and the people of Pennsylvania. I get to walk into the Capitol every single day knowing that I'm not beholden to any special interest groups or public sector unions, and I'm not owned by anyone. And for me, trust me, is a very, very refreshing and motivating fact for me. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have for me. And I want to make one comment quickly. Representative Grove and Representative Gillespie are here. And I will tell you that our delegation is strong and rock solid this year. The man to my right, Seth Grove, is a bulldog. He is digging. He has helped me with the budget. He has helped me immensely with this budget book. My chief of staff, Jason, spends a lot of time with Seth. Keith is involved. When I tell you this, and when I refer to greedy politicians, I could talk about some from Philadelphia, some from Pittsburgh, that have taken care of their districts very, very well. And this is not one of those districts that this took place. But I will tell you, I'm proud to serve with the representatives from your county, and I believe you need to understand they're doing a fabulous job, and I'm proud to be part of the team. So with that, I'll take questions. How's this work? Walt, I'll take this first, then we'll go back to the back table. I'm going to do a little Marco Rubio water drop here.
You've articulated the massive issues, so you've identified the problems. For those issues that you've identified, can you just take a couple of minutes and go through each one and tell what you have actually done to try to solve it?
Well, let's talk about the pension issue. Number one, the Senate did pass a pension reform bill. It went over to the House, and it got stalled in the House with the budget. But we have to put everyone into a 401k program at a specific date. If it's July 1st or whatever the date is, everyone goes into a 401k program. Folks, when I tell you this, we do not have the ability constitutionally to change the benefit system that is out there right now. And unless there's a miracle out there, we are going to have to lump this out. The state of Pennsylvania is paying between PSERS and SERS fund. They are paying 137 basis points to have about $70 billion managed. the state pays $1 billion in management fees. If you move that money into Vanguard index funds, and that may be a little extreme, you know, Rob Bowman might know this, but some of the others that are in the money management business. But if we were, I guarantee you, we could cut the management fees by probably $300 to $500 million. It hasn't been done yet. Governor Wolf identified that. I received a letter, you know, stating that they did reduce fees by $160 million. Well, we're writing a letter because I want to see who are the managers, how much fun, what amount of funds are being managed. You know, I want to see everything. I want to see who took the haircut where. I talk about the benefit situation. While somebody has to step out and tell state workers in Pennsylvania they're doing very well. And we have to, if the state is not in a complete self-insured program, we need to move in that direction. And I believe that in the private sector, most employees pay somewhere in the 23 to 30% range of their health care costs. The Philadelphia school teachers paid nothing towards their health care costs. They were asked to pay $5 per week. The Philadelphia teachers union sued the state. It's currently in the Supreme Court. It's problem after problem, but we have to, the pension, you know, we need to move the 401k program. We need to rein in the benefits, quite frankly. And we also need to downsize government. And I want to be very, very clear that I was on PCN call last week with Senator Leach from down Montgomery County. And he tried to put words in my mouth, like, we were talking about cutting teacher salaries and you're talking about cutting this. And I said, Dale, wait, let's back up here a second. I didn't say anything about cutting. You need to manage. And every year there are somewhere between probably 3,500 and 5,000 employees in the state of Pennsylvania that retire. Well, here's a novel idea. Why don't we, if we have 5,000 people retire, why don't we just hire 2,500 back and not hire the other 2,500? And over, say, a 2 to 5 year period, we can downsize government 10 to 15%. I mean, we have this huge, trust me, we are going to be challenged with an unbelievable labor crisis, you know, over the next 10 or 15 years. The demographics are changing. There are 10,000 people a day turning 65 for the next 20 years. It is going to become very, very difficult to find people. I don't care whether you're in state government or wherever. And right now, Pennsylvania is having a tough time, like at PennDOT, they're having a tough time competing for engineers. Well, why don't we downsize government? I didn't say cut salaries, but let's do this with a plan. Let's downsize government, and maybe we pay the remaining people more money, and overall we end up saving money. I mean, there are so many opportunities, but I will tell you that there is no plan. There's no strategy at all, and that's what frustrates me. And last year, for the first time ever, at my suggestion, the Senate Republican caucus, we went to Western PA and we had a 24-hour retreat in Overlake. And we talked about, you know, what we were going to do, the agenda in the Senate. Well, we didn't come up with a business plan. And we don't have a business plan this year. We don't have a strategy. I mean, our strategy right now is to try to figure this out and try to work through it and not have tax increases and to deal with some of the other problems. The school district issue is huge. I have a bill in the Senate that would eliminate prevailing wage mandates on school districts. York Suburban School District last summer put on, I believe, 4 to 5 replacement roofs on their district, on their buildings. And through a school board member, I learned that the cost was $2.8 million. Had they gone with prevailing wage mandate, that was prevailing wage mandate labor. Had they gone with non-prevailing wage, it could have been done for $2.2 million, $600,000 more. Now people say, well, you know, if you get away with prevailing wage, you're going to drive wages down. With prevailing wage mandates in school districts, you're going to drive wages down. Hey folks, if you can't find a $30 an hour roofer, you're not going to find a $30 an hour. You're not going to find an $11 an hour roofer when the market is 30 or more. So, Walt, I'm optimistic that I answered your question. We need to have a better plan. We need to have a better vision for Pennsylvania, and we don't have it. And the coal industry is being decimated. The natural gas industry is being decimated. There is so much stuff going on in Pennsylvania right now. It's mind-blowing. So, but we have to. It's like, you know, I learned a long time about business. If you're going to eat an elephant, eat it right at a time. But as I mentioned earlier, the huge turnover. If you can imagine, those of you that have built companies and you have senior management teams, if you had to like shuffle your management teams, I mean like get rid of them or replace them every 4 to 8 years, I mean, how could you function? That's what's going on in Harrisburg. It's a very troubling time. So back in the corner. Yes.
You mentioned the pension, but nobody ever talks about the legislative pension, which was increased even more than the others.
Well, the gentleman asked about the legislative pension for legislators. Listen, this all goes back to 2001. There was a pension vote. I wasn't there, just arrived 2 years ago, so I'm just a messenger. The vote went down, and what it did is it increased the pensions for all House and Senate members by 50%. Everyone else in state government by 25%. It changed the multiplier from 2 to 2.5, and it made it retroactive back to data hire. And if you see the list of the 1,000 people getting pensions over 100,000, it's mind-boggling. And we're going to have to work through that. And that's back to, I will tell you, and this is how I see it. There was a time when leadership in the House and Senate told their members what to do. They went down the hall, they cut a deal with the governor or whatever, they got together, and they came back and told their members, you vote for this. And members voted for it. And, you know, this day's over. It's truly over. And I can tell you that we're purging Senate members out, and there's a large purge out in the House. There is a movement taking place, friends. And it's not going to happen overnight, but I can tell you in the next 2 to 4 years, you're going to see a lot of movement. And you know, I can tell you, Keith, Seth, and I are there to do our jobs. We're there not to destroy people, but I'm telling you, I'm there to do my job, and I'm not there to be warm and fuzzy because I'm going to ask questions. But this pension issue is huge. One of the issues in the House that we did get it through the Senate that House and Senate members upon re-election would become new hires. So they would then, at that point, go into, you know, the 401k system. But I can tell you, there's a lot of greediness in Harrisburg. There's a lot of greediness everywhere. If you go out on Google world's greediest generation, or greediest generation ever, and I mean, there are hits everywhere. You know, when everybody talks about their grandkids, but if you ask somebody, would you give up 5% of your pension to help your grandchildren? Oh, don't touch my pension. So when you're getting, what, $90,000 a year, and you wouldn't be willing to give up like $10,000 to help your grandkids? This is an interesting time. So, yes.
Scott, first of all, thank you for serving. I also thank your mother for standing out the poll and asking people to write in. I wrote in.
Thank you.
I know that the rating agencies just downgraded Pennsylvania, I think, for the 5th time. And my direct question to you is, really, where are we going in the possibilities of the state going into a bankruptcy, some sort of bankruptcy situation where these duties and pension and so forth cannot be made accountable, and/or can the state actually dip into our Roths and IRAs and our own personal bank accounts to make up the deficits?
Well, that's a great question, and the question was, you know, with everything we have going on in the path, you know, are we headed for bankruptcy, and you know, are we going to dip into, you know, everybody's bank account, so to speak? Well, here's Jason, if I'm not saying this, or Keith or Seth, if I'm not correct here, please correct me. We constitutionally cannot file bankruptcy. What we're going to do is we are going to come out and pick your pockets for more money. That's what's going to happen. And I personally think that I would like to introduce a resolution and put it on the referendum for voters to vote whether we could file bankruptcy. Because you know what, that's a great negotiating tool. Because, you know, there's a saying in business, pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. And I tell you something, what I know of the top 1,000 people getting, you know, pensions of $200,000 and over, it's enough to make you sick. So we don't constitutionally cannot file bankruptcy. And we're going to have to dig our way out of this mess. But this is going to take some tough decisions. Last questions. Fred.
Scott, a couple months ago, Governor Wolf was standing where you are today, and I asked him a question about the state liquor stores, and his response was that it is a non-performing asset. And if it's a non-performing asset, then why is the state holding onto that asset? And is this a union problem? How do we resolve it?
Fred's question was, I guess Governor Wolf was here at the Rotary event, previously, and there were questions about the regulatory system. Listen, my opinion is the state should be out of the retail business. The state should hold on to the wholesale business because it's a moneymaker. But get out of the 500 or 600 stores, I guess it's 600 stores, get out of them, let the free enterprise operate. Let convenience stores have the opportunity to sell beer. Expand the system. But there are so many special interests. Every time, if there's even any rumor about liquor privatization or change, the convenience store people in Harrisburg, the beer distributors, the beer wholesalers, the liquor, it's unbelievable. And again, the union that represents the liquor store workers is a very powerful union, and they have a great lobbyist in Harrisburg. But it's back to somebody has a dog in the fight somewhere, and it's going to take somebody with sort of a magic wand saying this is the way it needs to be. And it is. We have 1,200 liquor licenses that are sitting in escrow, not generating any revenue, and we should get those licenses out. But there's a lot of fear. Beer distributors that come in and talk to us, oh my God, this is going to kill us. And I said, if you ever thought about re-engineering or reinventing your store so you can sell liquor and wine in addition to beer, and they don't want to do that. And it's like it's like no can do. So this is, I think we're going to see movement in the next 2 or 4 years, but it may take a new governor to get that done. Thank you.